Okay, this is episode 5, and what's weird about this situation is I'm actually going to divide this into 3 parts because, weirdly enough, it made sense to me to do so. Now, season 1, I did that a lot, okay? And actually, recently, season 1 has been reposted to Spotify, and I'm slowly getting a whole bunch of new feedback in regards to that season. There is discussion, so I might end up because I really want to do the YouTube thing. And oh wait, motherfucker, ass clown, eat shit and die. So those are random things, so I can guarantee I don't get any money. Because this whole podcast, like I know you guys are kind of used to this whole fucking weird ass culture in YouTube. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do a second podcast. And it's going to be YouTube. Because what's weird is I don't give a fuck about the culture as much. But I do know that out of all the apps, this is probably the better format. Spotify, I don't, and most of the other stuff I don't necessarily agree with. The structure I don't agree with. I'm getting too far ahead of myself because what you don't realize is that there's a whole philosophical concept I have behind me when it comes to, specifically because of music and American culture. And I'm trying to ease you through this. And I was like, who the fuck am I? Good point. I ain't shit, right? But I really am trying to figure out a way to parse out my ideas. Like, next year, I'm actually going to show up live in places and do random shit on stage. And what's weird is none of it's going to be what you've been listening to. I might pull ideas from it, but my goal is to keep refining these ideas I keep pitching to you. Because, okay, so some of the people, this young man I work with, I just fucking threw a shovel at him the other day verbally. And I didn't mean to do it. I don't mean to do it. I don't sit down and go, hey, I got an idea. Let's say some crazy random shit, right? That's not what I'm trying to do. But at the same point in time, I'm trying to take a bunch of things that I'm aware of, that I correlate, and not do the crazy red string thing, right? I'm already good. There's going to be a disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. Because understand, I'm recording the first 6 episodes just fucking randomly. Like, I am grinding a lot of hours of work and doing a lot of life things. So I'm trying to get through the 6 episodes. So I'm actually ahead to a certain degree. We're about to walk into the second Trump administration. Hasn't happened yet. Christmas hasn't happened yet. But there is a lot of things coming down the pipeline that I want to basically calibrate for, right? I'm not going to spend a lot of time about that. I actually really want to talk about American culture. And I'm kind of presenting to you these ideas. And I'm trying to do it in a very interesting order that makes sense to me and the people that listen to the show before you guys listen to the show. And that's how the feedback works, if that makes any sense. Right? Because I don't know what it is people get from me. I exist, but apparently when I've done stuff, it gets acknowledgement. Like from the street level. And from the academic level. And from the art level. But I'm like every other fucking person on the planet. There's no movement upward. But what's weird, if for something like this style, a fistful of fuckery, is not designed to make profit in the traditional sense, right? I'm not looking for your fucking AdSense. I'm not working. The commercials are going to be on here. I don't care about them, right? They're going to do what they're going to do, but I'm choosing the YouTube because it's just like from the beginning, it's a better format. I'm not going to tell you to fucking ring the bell, to click on this. I'm not going to tell you any of that. I don't care about any of that. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. That's up to you. It's your choice. To keep tabs on me, I'm going to post pretty much every 2 weeks. That's the rhythm. Season 2 is going to be like over double the size because I went through a fucking hard transformation from season 1 to season 2. And I'm still working on the mechanics of that, okay? Even though it sounds comfortable. I did radio for 4 years. So me getting into the process of talking on air to nothingness because it's being recorded. It's not like I'm talking to an audience and eventually, hey, I got a phone call. Hey, I got a request for a song. Hey, it's not like that. There's the feedback loop is refined. And I really don't know where my niche is, per se. I'll say crazy shit. I may even say something that's funny. But I'm really trying to like push a narrative. Like this episode is in 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to talk briefly about supply and demand, just to get you familiar with supply and demand, and just the idea of how it exists in our culture. Because I've actually had a couple of good examples of this. And then the second part's going to talk about the things that actually have some level of value. And the third part is the idea of tangible versus intangible, which seems to be a cultural thing that's going on right now. That part, if I do this right, will have some weight to it. And that's the thing that seems to be the genuine underlying conflict. Like, I genuinely feel that third-party interventions into creatives, like genuine fucking creatives, like people that you don't see on the fucking internet, that banging out a bunch of paintings and doing wild shit, right? A dude in a garage fucking catching whatever riff he can, right? And just pulling it and trying to see where it goes. The writer thinking that he can't write that becomes a writer. Like, there's levels that they move through. Now, I don't necessarily cancel out the internet. I think the internet has a purpose. And I think the reason, like the whole dead internet theory, I understand. I can understand that. That made perfect sense to me when I first heard that concept. Right? Because we're violating the way communication happens by having the internet and by me being able to record this and broadcast this. You are fucking up the status quo by doing this. So, of course, there has to be a bunch of random shit out there to reduce everything or to make it to this crazy white noise, right? There's a book, and I'm not sure if it went into a second edition, called Culture Gym by Callie Lazen, right? I don't remember the guy's biography. I know it's linked to Adbusters. If you guys ever read Adbusters, it's a kind of a crazy ass fucking magazine. It's like a magazine, but not a magazine. It's very strange. I implore you to pick up an issue. It'll take you a while. Well, it depends. It depends on how you do the issue. But it won't take you that long to figure it out. Now, the problem with them, and me, is I don't necessarily view the consumer culture in extremely negative light. I understand that there's a couple of pieces to that. And one of them is like, it's not necessarily about the consumer culture. It's not about people bartering and trading, exchanging cash for goods. It's really about the third party, the corporate involvement to a lot of things. And I have genuinely mixed feelings about corporations, but I do know that by design, they want more. And like a junkie, it's kind of getting fulfilled. And I know there's a handful of them that seem to be conflicted about this because more for them means something different. But in the end, it's the stock market, right? It's the cash they make. So I understand that. And I understand consumer culture because I understand that there's something special about it. And I'm going to argue for it because it gives us a weird benefit because it allows us to select. Weirdly enough, it allows us to reduce cost. But our waste and where things go, that's a complicated issue. Like, corporations typically don't want to recycle and don't want to repurpose and don't want to figure out how to clean everything up efficiently. Because for the longest time, that wasn't even a thought. That wasn't even a philosophical concept. So at the same point in time, I understand that consuming the goods and having the goods creates a lot of waste. So I get that. That is a whole other issue to tackle on another point in time. But the white noise that you feel on the internet is done on purpose. Because we're violating the way communication is supposed to be presented. And that is the fucking truth. We are all a bunch of little peripheries, and we're under a larger hierarchical structure, and we're not really supposed to have voice outside of the people around us. And here we are trying to communicate ideas and opinions, which most of my stuff is based on opinion and generalizations. And we're doing that and bypassing the strata, the way the communication is naturally supposed to flow, and how it was designed for many years, right? The cost for things to get a radio station, to get, like, we're simplifying that process, right? There's a whole other piece I'm going to eventually cover at some point. I have several fucking episodes, right? But in this situation, I'm actually going to cover the tangibles versus intangibles. And this is, you know what? Critically, you can get on me for this. And I will accept that, right? And maybe over time, my point of view will change, at least when it comes to tangibles, right? But at this point in time, it still hasn't changed enough. And I'm going to point out to you why. So the idea of supply and demand, I'm going to actually give you the Oxford Dictionary definition of that, right? Because that's kind of the better way to go to start off that point. So the idea of supply is to make something, to manufacture something, to present something, right? And the amount of the commodity, this product, the service you do, is desired by buyers, right? I'm completely fucking paraphrasing this, so. And there are factors to consider. There's so many fucking complicated things behind this, but I'm trying to keep it simple, right? So you have the product, there's a demand for the product, and the product price goes up, right? But let's say you're at a concert and water, people, the life essence of people in the heat. And all of a sudden that person's like, well, by supply and demand, we are losing water as we're selling water. So when there's a lot of people demanding it, we need to bring the prices up. That is price gouging. That is somebody taking advantage of a controlled situation, right? Especially if the event didn't allow the people to bring their own water in, right? So there's enough regulation to say no, that's a no-no, right? But in general, supply and demand is a situation where you have the supply, there's a high demand, and that might alter or change the price, right? So you have 10 rolls of toilet paper, like in COVID, right? And you have 20 people that want it. And the cost for the toilet paper was maybe $5. Now it's 10. There could be price gouging, right? So there's some point of regulation. But there's a push demand. So companies will say, hey, you got to pay a little more. They probably won't double the price, but they'll probably say you got to pay a little more because it's in high demand, right? That's the very baseline structure, supply and demand. This regulates the price. There's a lot of considerations that regulate this price, but this is how the price is regulated, right? This has been fucked with during the course of our culture. A real lot. And I'm not going to get too much into that. But I know the supply, I'll give you a couple examples. Eggs a few years back were really expensive. And a lot of it had to do with the new regulations that producers had to go through because the avian flu, right? And because of that, it slowed the process to meet market. To the best of my knowledge, this is how it was. So, and they had to change everything. So there was demand for eggs. Eggs do provide a lot for us. And the supply was short because of this X factor and this situation. So the prices went up. But now they're currently stabilized. Right? Growing up, my father pointed out something that was similar. And I'm not going to tell you where things gray. I'm going to actually leave out the company's name, but I'm going to explain it to you. During the oil embargo in the early 80s, the decision, and this happened again during the COVID situation, decision to take the price of gas that the companies, rather than absorbing them, they decided to integrate it into the price. That was another good way of them explaining, because they argued that it was costing them a lot of money in gas to ship the product to the sites, right? And this was an NSAID that was needed. Okay. This was something that could not, shit happens and people get sick, fevers, all that stuff. You need this. This is a product that was needed. And there was shortness of this. There was shortness of a lot of things during this time. This was a really interesting period of time. And my father noted that the price went up because gas. Okay, so people kind of accepted that deal in a very interesting way, right? And what I thought was interesting was that what he said afterwards. He said, the price of gas went down, but the product didn't. It kind of remained the same. It was like the new norm for the price. And that's interesting because indirectly that's predatory. Because here you are creating an agreement with the public, right? Saying to them, I'm adjusting the mic, sorry. Saying to them that, hey, okay, no problem. We're going to increase the price a little because of our gas. Rather than treating the gasoline like the price of doing business as the write-off, they didn't. They integrated it into the product. And what is predatory is that they got people who co-sign into this idea, but when the gas prices went back to normal, the product did not. It just didn't. People did not sign on to that concept in the long term, but they kind of forgotten about it because life went kind of resumed to normal. But my father noted that. He said, so one of the life lessons he kind of taught me, he was like, this is a thing, right? It's like living in a city that's a vampire city economically, meaning that you have to leave the city to travel up to an hour outside of the city to get a job that pays you well enough to be able to afford your housing and your clothing and have some disposable cash, right? But then you have to bring the money back to the city in order for the city to be functional. That's not solid structure at all. Those two lessons are the two lessons he kind of instilled onto me. It was just casual conversation. But that is supply and demand. It was like a few years back, right? When people were complaining about, what do you mean these workers want more money? Why do they want more money flipping burgers? And the company was like, well, I'm going to offset the cost. It's going to cost X amount of cents more per burger. Oh, these people are evil. Well, it's a person. It's a little different. It's not you paying for the gas for the company. It's a person's job that you're giving them more money so they have disposable income so they can survive. There's a larger argument there between minimum wage and livable wage that I'm not going to get into. But it's a little different. It's not the same, right? But the supply and demand was simply this. There was a demand, they raised the cost, but they rationalized raising the cost because they said gas. But when the gas prices went down, the cost still remained. And this has happened again a few times. So take that into consideration. So that's the basics of supply and demand. You have a product, you have a service you provide, and it's in demand, you can raise the price to it, right? There is a little piece I'm going to get into right now before I get into the other aspect of this. This aspect is simply this. This is an interlude because the second part of this is actually concept of value. So there's recently, I know at the beginning I said Christmas. I'm recording this at different points in time. I had to review it, so on and so forth. So I do apologize for that. So there's going to be conflict of interest. The beginning, you said it wasn't even Christmas yet. It's already after Christmas. We're not even into the new year, though. Actually, this episode will be done tonight. So I'll have all the 6 episodes recorded before 2025. Any which way. So the discussion was about parties, Christmas parties, and providing foods, like doing little soirees or whatever you fucking do. Just get a bunch of shit and guzzle down food, whatever the hell you got going on. And so people put in money, right? And I didn't realize how weird people are about this. Like, it's expected loss, right? So money comes in, and I said, we're going to order pizza and wings, right? That kind of makes sense. Like, yeah, it's the only thing that's really open right now, and it's good shops. So I'm like, okay. So let me throw some money towards it, right? So you throw up some money, and then somebody else matches your money, and somebody else matches your money, and then you have a larger order, right? Now, what I'm not expecting is people to buy in, right? First of all, it's the holiday season, right? I'm not expecting somebody to come up to me going, well, here's my $5 so I can have a piece. No, have a piece. Just understand the people that paid for it will get their stuff first. Makes sense, right? Everything else after the fact. It's kind of a tip to the hat. It's one of those things. But you ordered enough for a lot of people, right? And nobody wants to bring this shit home. Maybe there's one person, like Hilda, over there in the corner, is like, I'm going to take the napkins too, right? No. Nobody wants to bring this home. And you're putting the money up as expected loss because it's the fucking holiday season. You know, I'm not tracking people's beverage choices when I come here, right? Unless somebody's diving to the fucking bottom of a bottle of like whatever, like rubbing alcohol or whatever the fuck they're drinking. I don't know, people weird. Unless they're doing something like that, I'm not going to sit there and go, there's an alarm, right? But if somebody's going to do that, then bring your own. Add to the collection so there's more, right? Plus or minus. So I don't necessarily, during that time, I don't necessarily think of buy-in, but that's expected loss. That's a concept, right? So that's one concept. The second part of this is the idea of price of operation, right? Like one of the best ways you could do when you work in a place and it requires licensure, right? It requires power to run the place. It requires this, it requires that. All these costs, all this overhead, right? And it's expected that you pay this price, right? Maybe you can get discounts here and there, right? Bundle structure here and there. But the idea is you're going to have to spend money to make money. And that seems to be the larger fucking problem for the really, really powerful and wealthy. They don't want to spend the money, right? That's why Hollywood gets wonky. What it's like, well, we want you to, just show us on spec. Like, no. You want me to sell your ideas. You want to pitch your ideas so we can steal the fucking ideas. No, fuck that, right? But that's the thing. In their mind, they're thinking, well, how dare you? Our time is worth something. And they're right. Their time is worth something. I already explained that to you in an earlier episode, right? But the idea, it's a cost of operation. It's expected. Like the NSAID I was talking about in the early 80s, they should have absorbed the cost of gas, not bring up their fucking product. But that's not how it works. But yet we went unnoticed, except a few of them. There were people, like back in the day, they seemed to bitch more about things and get angrier more about things. But somehow they kind of lulled us. Not as much Generation X, but definitely millennials. They seem to kind of lull a little. Like, yeah, okay. It's one of those things. So anyway, which way? Those are two concepts I want to explain before I get into the next whole piece. Number 2, the concept of value. Now, I'm going to tell you, I can dig up my nose and pull out the biggest fucking snot, right? Roll it up and put it on a beautiful little piece of parchment paper, right? And then say, this thing is $473, right? Because I'm valuing that big, huge, gooey piece of snot as whatever. It took me a while to generate it. Whatever fucking bullshit I come up with, right? That offsets everything. Because sometimes, let's say there is a person, which, is like, but I like the taste of snot. I wonder what somebody else is like, right? I know it's fucking gross, but bear with me. I'm trying to think of something extreme in order to present to you. Because here's weird. There's probably some fucked up extreme idea out there that is real. Right? Didn't somebody sell their virginity on the internet? Like, there's like a bunch of crazy shit. But it's the concept of value. This is the value you're putting towards it. This is the price person's willing to pay. Right? It's a little different from supply and demand. Right? And I'm not even sure if I'm naming it right, but to me, that's what it is. It's like you're fixating a value onto something. Right? Now, it's interesting because artists don't necessarily understand. This is where the market gets weird. Right? And I'm going to give you a real mainstream example of this, but I'm also explaining to you how this works over time. So there is a great documentary, and I fucking advise you to watch it because it explains a lot of shit, and it's great for the fucking cynic, right? I know I just kind of fucking screwed up everything, but it's great for the cynic, right? But I would advise you, it's called Hype with apostrophe, right? You need to see this doc. The soundtrack is dope as fuck, but you need to see the documentary because it's about the invasion of the Seattle sound in the 90s. And it's people live in route and situations. It's showing you how it developed, but it's also showing you how fucking ridiculous it gets. And you need this. This is an essential viewing, right? I'll have a few of them, but you do need to do this. And as my cousin and my coworker will say, "Motherfucker's giving us homework again." Yeah, I am, I guess. As far as I know, I think it's on Tubi, and Tubi's free. So, well, it's kind of free. Is it free? I don't know. Do you pay pieces of your soul? Maybe. All right, but it's on there. And I watched it recently, and I own a copy. And I think to myself, I'm like, this is essential because it's showing you the concept of value. And there's a guy who literally is in there and showing you posters he made for various different concepts. Because you don't realize those posters, those one-shot posters, end up becoming fucking valuable. Because supply and demand, right? that plays into it, but there's also the concept of value. So to a Barry Manilow fan, Super Suckers poster from back in the early 90s would not be valuable, right? But to a Super Suckers fan, it is. Concept of value, right? The perception of this. And this guy just fucking cuts up things, cuts up his posters. That's like hundreds of dollars right there. I'm like, at this point, it's probably like thousands of dollars. But that is a thing. Now, I didn't realize how bad this extended itself because I had a Descendants concert flyer, right? It had a skull on it. It was a dope looking flyer. A friend of mine gave it to me from a radio record shop, right? Suncoast Records, right? And I liked it. I'm like, cool. He's like, yeah, I have a bunch of them. I'm like, cool. And time goes by, it get tattered, whatever the fuck. I hung it up. I did hang it up like normal. I didn't frame it. I didn't think to frame it. Like that wasn't a thought, right? My like early 20s. I don't understand this is a thing yet, right? So at some point in time, I know somebody had framed them. And I realized like he had a later Descendants poster. And he was like, Descendants is a punk band from California. They were a band that existed at various points in time. Milo Goes to College is like the creme de la creme of punk albums. Like, it's one of the many amazing albums. They have a great discography in general, but that's the album that you usually sell on. Suburban Home. There you go. There you go. Look it up right now. It's more homework. Suburban Home, Descendants, right? Milo Goes to College. Great fucking album. Probably easily top 10 best punk albums of all time. They have several albums. They waxed and waned. That's a little sidebarring here. They waxed and waned because of Switch Out. The singer went to college, ended up having a career. The opposite of them would be All, the Two-Headed Monster. Just switch out the singer. There's several singers to All, to my understanding. I think Chad Price is the one that stuck out to me the most. Any which way. So there is this band that exists, and they put out flyers. And I had an earlier one, and I mentioned it to, he's like, well, that one's worth a couple $100 now. I said, on what fucking market? Like, this is a thing? And he's like, yes, Paul, you fucking foolish plebeian. This is a fucking thing. I'm like, oh, sir, do educate me. And I explained to him I had one from the 80s. And he's like, dude, where is it? I don't know. Like, life goes on. You know, here's what's weird. So I framed something because I thought it was dope because I realized it was Daniel Close artwork. So back in the early 90s, there was OK Soda. And Coca-Cola made it. Daniel Close, to best of my working knowledge, I'm not sure if he did the full campaign, but he did most of the campaign. Daniel Close did a comic book called 8-Ball Comics. One of the results of that, a couple of movies. His work is really good. Indie stuff, I would advise it. The difference between millennials and like Gen Xers is we kind of rode that fucking coaster a little harder than normal. I know there's a bunch of offshoots now. I think it's more Generation Z though, because I see a lot of younger people. A lot of older people don't pick up the indie comic books as much. It's strange. Anyway, which way? So that was the thing. So I framed that, but I didn't keep the box in whole. Like, I don't think too much of it. But somebody actually wanted to buy it off me at one point. And I'm like, I don't want to sell it. I just liked the art. I thought that was kind of a cool concept. They had a phone line, like, everything's going to be okay. It's just really fucking strange, very 90s. But I liked the soda. I liked the artwork. The soda was basically like a composite of like orange and Coke and like Sprite. It was a Coke product. So it was like these mixture of Coke, like, you know, the shit you do with fountain drinks in general. It was good. It was kind of cool. So which way? So that's the concept. That is a thing, right? Now I'm going to give you more of a stronger anecdote when it comes to that. So in 2000, one of the albums that probably make my, top 21st century albums, Deftones released White Pony. Now, it was first released, it was in the summer, they had these two copies. There was a red one and a black one, right? There was a complete covered jewel box. CDs corresponded. There was a link to a song you got, and there was a whole number. They were numbered, right? And sometimes records do this. Like if you get earlier records, you'll be surprised at how many weird little shit you'll get, right? Sometimes it's even in the recordings. This is a good example of this, right? The cover art was black. It had their bold writing. It was linked to the website. So when these things first, I want to say they were $21, around $20 each. It was like pricey, especially for CDs at the time. Because CDs at that point in time were on the decline, like money wise. They weren't as gouging. There's a good example of fucking price gouging. Like, oh, we know we have your dope. You like music, you gotta constantly pay $18 a CD or $15 a CD. It's fucking ridiculous, right? So you pretty much mix mash and fucking found the dope shops, like the cool fucking places that can get them relatively cheap. Because in all honesty, they're gonna make the same amount of money off the CD, especially if it's good, for a long time. And that is something I'm gonna get into a little more in a few minutes. So this album came out. And I want to say Newberry Comics, shout out to Newberry Comics in New England, because like the shop guy said the other day, back in fucking September, he's like, we don't get a lot of people in it as much anymore. I'm like, why? He's like, I don't fucking know. He's like, but you have really good collection of albums, like records, CDs. Like, they shrunk a little. And I was kind of hoping to expand, like more. But online, you can still get this stuff relatively inexpensive. Like, it's kind of cool, right? You can get fucking limited prints for like $20. Like, it's Newberry Comics. I'm doing a weird plug because I like the shop, because the shop gave me a lot of shit when I was growing up. It's not because they're fucking paying me. They don't have a probe in my ass. We're good to go. Okay? So they had the Deftones CD cheaper. Oh, see? So my friend at the time was like, hey, I'm trying to get this thing. And he realized that I think Circuit City didn't exist. I want to say it was Best Buy at the time. Whatever the fuck other places, corporate entities existed. I'm not sure if we had a lot of Tower Records. I don't remember if we did. So anyway, he usually get it separately. But he kept saying the fucking price was high. So I happened to see the price at the time. I'm like, well, this is inexpensive. I can grab it. I have some extra cash. I'll grab it from you. You just reimburse me whenever. So what ended up happening is he ended up buying it two on sale at some other place. So I ended up having an extra copy. So initially I was going to bring it back. That was my thought, right? And then I said, well, fuck it. Time went on. Life happened. And I kept carrying this thing around. Now, there's been albums over the years I've had sealed. Like, I have Body Count. First Body Count album. Fucking Body Count. First Body Count album. Listen to it. Fuck you. Listen to the album. Actually, you know what? Listen to Bloodlust. It's more recent. That shit's the fucking bomb. If you're like, well, he plays a cop. Fuck you. Okay? The man's been saying this same shit for years. Piss off. Listen to Body Count, Bloodlust, First Body Count album. Actually, all of them. They're pretty good. So anyway, so I had the cassette because he became a central controversy because of a song, right? Cop Killer. There's a lot to unpack with that. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to move past that. So there was a reissue, but a label, right? And it was a track from the Ice-T album, I think Freedom of Speech. And that was a replacement track. But the original copies were kind of existing. So if you had those, so I ended up having those because at the time, D&G Records, which I'm not even sure if even exists anymore, used to sell their cassettes for like six something. At most, you pay $7.35. There's a long fucking history how I remember that number, but that was a thing. So it was kind of cool. So I ended up getting a copy of it. I still have a copy of that. Right? Hate cassettes. Can't fucking stand the format. But I have a copy of that. Let's get back to Deftones. Anyway, so Deftones existed, and the album existed. It sat with me for a while. There is different versions of the album. There's a blue cover that starts off with Mini Maggot, which is a great start. Don't mind it. Then there's the other versions. Fati Seda is the standard opening track, right? The album is very important. The third album, Deftones Canon, it kind of defined, there's a good pivot from that point on outward, because they kind of get classified like a metal band. Especially the fake bullshit concept of nu metal, right? Yeah, I'm calling it out. Fuck that title. That's some guy named fucking Chad in some fucking office somewhere. Fucking, Bartholomew, whatever the fuck the rich people's fucking names are, going, you know what? We need to call it nu metal. We'll define it with NU. Isn't that cool? So you have no pants on. That's all right, though. Nobody will notice. Nobody will ever get on to me for this. That's the thing. So anyway, so this album exists, and it sat with me for a while. And then eventually the 20th anniversary of the album. And Deftones said, you know what? We're going to do something special because this was a fucking pivotal album. We're going to give this to DJs and turntablists and EDM artists and producers, and would have them do a remix of the album, right? Was it good? Yeah, it's fucking good. We'd call it Black Stallion. So the album came out, and the interest in the album, because somehow Deftones got through the zeitgeist and into the mainstream and really fucking got a lot of people focusing on this. I was looking forward to it, but I was also knew Deftones existed. So the album came out, and what I didn't know, because people made me immediately aware of it, they're like, dude, you still have the black CD jewel case. I said, no, bad shit happens. I had to sell all my CDs at one point. So they're like, oh shit, it's worth a lot of money right now. I said, well, how much is it going for? I think at the time it was like one something, like an open CD, maybe 200. Right? So I'm like, oh shit, I think I have the red one. So I'm going through shit and keepsake stuff. And I had the red one. And the red one was going for like sealed. They were going close to $300. I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's a fucking thing. But that's a concept. Now understand, supply and demand was simply this style of CD was released during this period of time and there's demand for it. Right? That's one thing. The other thing is gravitas. Like, this is Deftones. So Deftones fans are looking for this. So even their products, there was a Ramones. Yes, I seen the Ramones. I seen Ramones when they were all alive. Fucking cool, right? Last tour. Adios amigos. And that's how old I am. So, when my kids are like, oh, you happy to see this band? I'm like, well, it was a cool show, but I've seen Pink Floyd. Fuck you. Right? So, that's the thing. So, at some point in time, I had the shirt. And then I seen it in a store once, and it was like sealed up. I'm like, what's the deal with that? And that's the last tour shirt of theirs. I'm like, it never even occurred to me that would be a thing. See, I didn't walk through life going, that's a price. Look at me, I'm going to pay that price. I'm going to give you that price. I'm going to mark everything up. No, because that's not how we're taught to think of things. That concept of value wasn't a thing, right? So they recognize that. They recognize that Hot Wheels people, right, recognize that certain cars will sell really well at the car shows, right? So they mark up the prices based on current market. eBay does this. It inflated a lot of things. Actually, eBay infected the comic book pricing market so much that once there's a sale made, it could affect the outcome of that price. So that's a concept. There's another piece to this. There is probably a term for it. I can't think of the exact term. The exact term eludes me because I was not trained in that discipline. But I know there's a term that describes the degradation of a product over time. It explains why Action Comics #1 is worth so much money. Because it came out, it was released during a period of time, and over time, there are not time people that treat comic books like they treat comic books now. They're literally affordable works of art. There is a whole market based on covers and just original artwork. And some of that artwork gets graduated to being a poster, right? And even then, that poster only runs for a period of time. So that's how that works, right? So Action Comics comes out back in the day, and let's say, for argument's sake, 1,000 of them were printed. Probably not, probably a lot more than that. Well, over time, based on the treatment of the comic books at that time, and based on the accessibility to that comic book, copies start becoming shitty, or get thrown out, get destroyed, right? There's actually an interesting story about a guy who, in Massachusetts, back when X-Force was a thing, and if you don't know what the fuck X-Force is, give me a second. X-Force was a comic book of wet work designed when Cable took, I think, the 3rd or 4th class of X-Men, the New Mutants, and made them a galvanizing force against the Mutant Liberation Front, the terrorist group, right? This was a thing. So the first issue, when it came out, it was on the back of our existing title called New Mutants. It was a popular issue. This was a popular book, right? And this book existed and had polyback. And in the polybag had cards. And the cards, to my understanding, there was a dealer in New England that, and this is anecdotal, this is story, not sure how true this is, but it adds to the larger story here, who sliced open copies and took certain cards out of one specific character. I want to say it was Cable. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe it was Deadpool. I'm not sure. And by doing that, he altered the numbers of issues that time. I mean, it went into second print. There's a second printing of this, right? So, and it's interesting enough, the second printings sometimes are worth a lot of money. Third printings too. Like, it's very fucking strange. This is all concept value, right? Because this is beyond supply and demand now, right? This is like, the difference is people want the third printing of the first Professor Hulk cover. Why? Because it's harder to get, and it's a dope looking cover, right? So they're like, I want that. That's their feelings and their thoughts behind why they want that dictates the market, not the service or the situation provided. It's they put a value to that thing. That's the difference, right? So Deftones' album went up to like $300. It's still worth something now because there is a value for it, right? But not that high, right? That wasn't a thing. So taking into consideration that as a factor, right? The last part I'm going to get into, I know I missed something, and I will review this and maybe address it some other point in time. The last part is the thing that bothers me the most, right? We have power consumer culture. I already explained to you that we disseminate capital, just being part of the grid, right? But here's what's funny, is we consume things and we hold on to things that we treasure, right? I have a copy of The Razor's Edge, the 84 version, the one with Bill Murray in it. I like the book. I like the Tyrone Powers movie. I really love the Bill Murray version. Now, the only problem with the film is that they don't age the way the makeup doesn't exist, but it doesn't matter there's enough in the film that implies time has passed. Right? Now, this film was a bitch to get because back in the day, films would come in and out of print. So it was a bitch to get. So I was willing to pay the $25 for it when it came out. And then it went away. Squirreled away. I probably would have paid $30 for the cover that had the poster cover. But it wasn't. It was a screenshot from the picture. That tells you a lot about me, right? I fixated value on that thing. But here's what's weird. So I have a copy of that, and I have a copy of different films, right? Because I like films. That's why the whole other fucking podcast I'm going to do is about film. You know, the difference between this and that. This is random. I'm in a process right now with talking to a lot of people, and maybe you can help. I know you're not going to read the comments. I'm not going to read the comments. Somebody else is going to. I guarantee you somebody else is going to. And they'll report back to me whatever fucking nonsense. I don't care enough to want to fucking feed into people's shit, right? This structure is just thrashing about. But there might be something to what I'm doing, right? Because the people that are listening to it that I'm getting feedback from, and why it's such a long form, is because they want me to exercise these ideas a little further, right? I'm going to say something that's fucked up, right? But you really have to put some weight to it. And I'm working my way up to say this, right? So, that movie exists. There was a copy of 28 Days Later, right? Great film. It pretty much started, one of the major films that started the neo-zombie thing. But I advise you to watch it because the neo-zombie films, the better ones, are the ones that the story beyond just the zombie concept, right? And I mean, shit, you had a whole series of it, but I still think Walking Dead Season 2 was probably the best season. And everybody's like, fucking no, it's not. Yeah, it was kind of a weird bookend. Season 1 didn't sell me. Season 2 did. So, 28 Days Later came out, and there was a period of time in Target right now, I'm going to pause for a second, but they decided to not have DVDs anymore. Right? Because we're going to the intangible. So, they sold a bunch of CDs. This is during COVID. DVDs, sorry. This is during COVID. And DVDs were like $5 a pop. So I was buying a bunch of different ones. Because I was thinking, gifts. So I gave out a bunch of ones. And then roughly about 6 to 8 months ago, I was reading in a magazine because of the Danny Boyle jumping on to 28 Years Later. Is a thing. And then people were realizing there's no stream services that have this right now. And it was hard film to get. Right? So the price of the film went up. Especially if it was in Blu-ray. Right? And that's the thing. Because of demand. So it does affect the market. Like the suppression. And having tangible stuff will eventually value. Like even the concert fucking sweatshirt you bought. Like I gave my coworker, my young coworker, I said to him, I said, the fucking sweatshirt you're wearing, if you bought it from the website at the time and it ran a print number over a period of time, it still has value. You could buy one, buy the other one. It still has weight and value. It's weird because I've lived long enough to know that the styles of graphics they had back in the day, sometimes they were licensed. Sometimes they were just one-shot deals. And that's the thing, right? But in the end, you're still fixing value, right? That is still kind of a dope thing. And I think the big headache would be bootleggers. In punk rock culture, they don't give a fuck. They just will bootleg everything. And for the most part, it's kind of understood, right? But in other genres, not as much. That's just one example. What they're selling us on bothers me. Because the idea of not owning films, not having tangible product in your hand, that can go up in value, right? Because of that degradation of product and the stopping of printing things, right? That's a thing. So weirdly enough, a simple movie can become a weird antiquity, like a weird piece that exists through time, right? Like old records, which is still valuable. And action number one. Now think about this for a second. They want to sell us in services on downloads to reduce their costs. Because that's what they're doing. They're reducing their costs and getting us on their dope. Now, don't get me wrong. Stream services exist, right? Music services exist. But they're not paying the artists the way they should pay them. That's fact. I think YouTube is probably getting close to it. But even then, right? You buy a product from an artist, especially directly from the artist. You are giving them cash in hand. You are saying to them, I appreciate the work you're doing. That's a thing. Keep doing the work. The middleman, the person in between, is the one really kind of to look at. You need to have a very peculiar point of view in how you're seeing them. Those people are helping to a certain degree. But to another degree, they're building their whole industry off the back of these artists that don't see all of the money that they get. And a lot of it is because they have access to distribution and exposure. Now think about this. These tangible products, like I'm going to give a shout out to Taylor Swift in general. The music, but I kind of respect her because there's tangible product. It's flooding the stores right now because there's no other buffer to it. Because Walmart and Target seem to not really want records, but they have to have records because the industry. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. Records never went away. The artist had to decide, check the box to say, yeah, I want records released of this. Because they're made. I'll give you an example of this. So, my cousin gave me a Rob Zombie album. Hellbilly Deluxe, right? He's like, hey, look, it's first time on black vinyl. He's like, what does that mean? I says, well, at the time, I think he may have had specialty vinyl. That's possible. He may not have had a normal album release at the time. That may not have been the thing because when it was released. But I can tell you right now, Rage Against the Machine's Battle of Los Angeles did have an actual release. I bought the release. Right? So they had a tangible album. Pearl Jam was pretty good about that. A lot of artists are, like especially ones that are into the whole record thing. Like, so they never went away. But to the American public, the larger volume of people, it did. Right? So when I had some older guy tell me, oh, records are coming back. They never went away. They're just not in the box stores. They're in the boutiques. They're in the specialty shops. Right? Box stores are just collections of smaller boutiques. That's how the departments were originally designed. Right? Actually, how stores are running really strange. But if you see old-timey movies, there's always like a person in that each individualized department. And I want to say Sears and certain stores kind of kept that going for many years. And you can kind of see the remnants of that in like a Target or Walmart or what other box stores? Kohl's. People have their own little sections, but there's not all the time is there prices. Like Macy's, you can kind of see the different counters in different areas. That's the thing, right? So take a boutique and know that a box store is designed with the idea of having smaller boutiques in it. But over time, they kind of get watered down. And they can't keep up with the markets the way small niche stores can. Because that's their whole fucking thing. Like, you get a comic book from, let's say, Barnes & Nobles, right? Because I think they sold comic books for a period of time. You're going to get whatever the news, whatever they decide, this is DC, this is Marvel. You're not going to get like any, independent stuff. Maybe the closest thing you'd get, maybe Dark Horse, maybe an Image, maybe, right? But that's the thing. If you really wanted like real comic books, you would go to a comic book shop. So we'll start from that. Comic book shops have apps. Comic book companies have apps to read the comic books. But what's weird is if you're just reading, that's fine. However, if you're collecting, that's not a thing. You have to have the tangible copy that has value. The intangibles don't. And I know they're trying to create these weird speculative markets with NFTs and all that shit. I'll be honest with you, that little piece of graphic or whatever the fuck you have, that's, if you tie that to something, it's going to be worth even more, right? A good example would be memes. Funny, like a genuinely good meme. Tied to a product, tied to a t-shirt, right? Why? Because you just changed something. You took it from the ether and put it into reality. So the only people benefiting from intangibles are the middleman. It's not the artist as much. It's not the fucking, what do you call it? It's the middleman. And we're living in that life now. This is the thing that's being pushed. Now, there's a couple things I'm going to say in life. And this is speculative. But just based on the idea of ripple affecting something, right? So when you're in sociology, that's the thing you do. You ripple affect a cause. Like, something is going to happen. So you try to figure out, well, what's the worst and best case scenario of these things? Now, any decision made in society, in a family, in a room, by you about to toss off, right? Any decision made is a cost ratio decision, right? You're constantly thinking to yourself like, should I do this? Should I not do this? What are the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? So on and so forth, right? So having an intangible world means a world, they'll sell it to you as, we're saving the planet. And, are you though? Because you're still making these other fucking products, which are eating up a lot more shit, right? We still have to clothe our ass, right? But for the peasant, for the person below a certain amount, getting on that dope, that I'm going to pay, the $3 a month subscription and not actually have the album. Well, I can't afford the $20, but I can afford the $3 subscription. Okay, that's how they get you. Then all of a sudden, eventually, you're paying more than what the album's worth. But I have access to all this and stuff, right? Okay, cool. Let's say if you don't have any internet. Let's say, because we don't even have the infrastructure for that for the long term, right? Walk that through. Now I would add the whole value of cost, right? The value of cost means that the products that you may have collected are now valuable to somebody, right? Let's say if the world eats shit and the collectors come to the house to sweep the house for valuables, right? They have to do a lot more work to do that. And this has happened in societies. Not saying it's going to happen, but walk it through the worst case scenario first before the best case scenario. Because the only best case scenario is a fraction of money goes to the artists. And it eventually creates a financial problem for movements. It means the person in the middle has more power than the artist and the audience. And this has started from as far back as I can tell. So selling us in the idea of like this streaming dope is fucked up. And I have a hard time selling to it. I'm not saying there is no use for it. And before anybody loses their shit going, my God, man. No, I agree. Radios have gotten too comfortable. And eventually I'm going to tackle on radio stations because they drive me fucking insane. Right? And even the idea of paying for a fucking service to have pay radio is fucking crazy, right? I mean, you have public air. What the fuck? But they serve a purpose. It gets ideas out there. It's art out there. We do need access to art. It makes us human, whether you realize it or not. And I think by doing what they do, they've created a large cavern of control. So, and oddly enough, I'm trying not to make nods, but Josh Johnson covers this at some point in very more eloquent detail than I can. But I agree with it. I agree with it before you even said it, right? Because I've been saying it for a while. Like, the idea of being connected to your artists and knowing artists exist is a very funny thing. My top album for this year is Tanked. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's by the Idols. The Idols, I think, have like 4 or 5 albums, and they're barely getting radio play from where I'm at. The album is really fucking good, right? It's probably the best album to come out this year. Hands down. Like, I've listened to that album so much, and I'm not getting bored of it. And it's different from the other albums because there's a lot more rounding out, right? Fiddler has existed since 2013. And unless you go to a show, unless somebody knows somebody, you don't know they exist. Because if I go to a record shop right now, even the local record shop here, I cannot buy their vinyl. Which is crazy as a concept. Because they are a good band. They experiment a lot. They raise the bar. Right? Vince Staples had one of the best rap albums out this year. And that's saying a lot, because Killer Mike had an album. And these are off the top of my head. 2024. Kim Gordon put out a fucking strong album. I could not buy it at the fucking store. Immediately. However, I will tell you, and this says a lot. When I was Newberry Comics, it was there. And they're a franchise. They're a local franchise in that area. Right? But they're one of many. And it bothers me that a lot of these stores kind of shuttered. These boutiques. But in my opinion, it should be doubled down more. We should be virtual. You can always step back from technology. Right? Because living in an intangible world means that you're paying dope to the middleman. And at any point in time, they can cut you off. You own a tangible product. You can play it in your house. Right? And we're getting closer to having efficient solar. So if you argue about electricity, there's an idea. But just walking through that world, right? That some rich person may want your product and you don't have the product, but they can, that's a thing, right? Maybe pushing all rich people evil? No. But that's the thing. Who else would pay to pop into that? Somebody that's a fanatic? Somebody that's wealthy? Somebody looks at it that way? That's the thing. I don't buy products with the idea that, this could be worth money. That's not how I function. Right? But I do buy products because I appreciate them. Right? And I share them. There's been many times I've given people shit. Like, here you go. Like, I don't know. Can't remember the last thing I did. Black Sabbath album, maybe. Something like that. The idea of living in an intangible world fucks with my head. And the fact that there's a percentage of people embracing it because they're being seduced to embrace it because it's a cheaper way says a lot. But it's hard to keep up. And the only reason the intangible world exists is because the stores have become a little roughshod. But if that's the case, then go back to the boutiques because the art is in the boutiques. This has been episode 5. Thanks.